In 1453, the greatest city on earth fell silent. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople had stood as the richest, most sophisticated, most powerful city in the Western world. Its walls had never been broken, its gold domes caught the light of every sunrise. Its emperor claimed to be the successor of Caesar himself. And then, on a Tuesday morning in May, it was gone. Most people had never heard of the Byzantine Empire. Most people don't know it existed. And that is one of the strangest historical oversights in human history, because Byzantium was Rome. It was the Roman Empire, and it lasted 1,000 years longer than Rome is supposed to have. If you watched part 1 of this series, you know Rome fell in 476 AD. A barbarian chieftain named Odoacer deposed the last emperor. The western half of the empire collapsed, but here is what most history classes skip entirely. There were two halves to the Roman Empire, and the eastern half, based not in Rome but in Constantinople, did not fall. It kept going for another 1,000 years. The people who lived there did not call themselves Byzantines. That name was invented by historians centuries later. They called themselves Romans. They spoke Greek, they worshipped as Christians, and they considered themselves the direct continuation of the empire of Caesar and Augustus. To understand Byzantium, you need to understand one date, 330 AD. That is when Emperor Constantine I, the first Christian emperor of Rome, moved the capital of the empire from Rome to a small Greek city called Byzantium on a peninsula between Europe and Asia. He renamed it after himself, Constantinople, the city of Constantinople. That city, modern day Istanbul in Turkey, would be the capital of the most powerful empire in Europe for the next 1100 years. The first great emperor of Byzantium, and in many ways the greatest, was Justinian I. He came to power in 527 AD. He was not born into nobility. He was the nephew of a peasant soldier who had worked his way up, and he had a vision that consumed his entire reign. He wanted to reconquer the West, to put Rome back together, to rebuild the empire of Augustus. His general Belisarius, one of the greatest military commanders in history, leading an army half the size of his enemies, reconquered North Africa in a single campaign, then Italy, then parts of Spain. For one extraordinary decade, the Mediterranean was once again a Roman lake. But Justinian's legacy is not ultimately about conquest, it is about what he built. He reformed the entire legal code of Rome, producing the Corpus Juris Civius, the foundation of every legal system in Europe today. He reformed the government, he fed the poor, he built roads, hospitals, and churches across the whole empire. And then there is Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. Completed in 537 AD, it was the largest cathedral in the world, a title it held for nearly 1,000 years. When Justinian first walked inside and saw the completed dome floating above him, he reportedly said, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." It still stands to this day. After Justinian, Byzantium faced 1,000 years of pressure from every direction. Persian armies from the east, Arab armies following the rise of Islam, Viking raiders from the north, Crusaders from the west, who were supposedly allies but who would eventually sack Constantinople themselves. The Byzantines survived through a combination of three things: their impregnable walls, their money, and their weapons. Most famous amongst those weapons was something so dangerous that its formula was kept secret for centuries. And that was Greek fire, a liquid weapon sprayed from ships and walls that burned on contact with water and could not be extinguished. It destroyed entire Arab fleets. It saved Constantinople at least twice, and to this day we do not know exactly what was in it. For 7 centuries, Byzantium was the most sophisticated civilization in Europe. While Western Europe stumbled through the Dark Ages, Constantinople had universities, hospitals, libraries, running water, and a civil service. Byzantine scholars preserved the text of ancient Greece and Rome that Western Europe had lost. Plato, Aristotle, Homer. Without Byzantine scholars, much of classical civilization would simply be gone. Their currency, the gold solidus, was the dollar of the medieval world. For 700 years it was accepted without question. From England to India, Byzantine merchants traded silk, spices, and luxury goods across the known world. But empires do not last forever, and Byzantium's decline, when it came, was long, painful, and deeply self inflicted. In 1054, the Great Schism split Christianity in two: the Catholic West and the Orthodox East. Constantinople and Rome, once allies, became rivals, then enemies. Then came 1204, the Fourth Crusade. An army of Western Christian knights supposed to be heading to the Holy Land instead turned on Constantinople. Their fellow Christians and sacked the city. For 3 days they looted one of the richest cities in history. Bronze horses stolen from the Hippodrome were shipped to Venice, where they still stand today. Byzantium never fully recovered. It was restored in 1261, but the empire that came back was a shadow. The territory was gone, the money was gone, the confidence was gone. What remained was Constantinople, one brilliant, besieged city, and the memory of what it had once been. By 1453, the Byzantine Empire consisted of little more than Constantinople itself. The city that had once commanded an empire stretching from Spain to Mesopotamia now governed a few miles of walls and a population of perhaps 50,000. And outside those walls stood Mehmed II, 21 years old, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and absolutely determined to take that city that every Muslim ruler before him had failed to conquer. He brought with him an army estimated at 80,000 men and a cannon so large it had to be cast on site because it could not be transported fully assembled. It fired stone balls weighing 600 kilograms. The walls that had stood for 1,000 years began to crack. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, died on the walls. When he saw that the city was lost, he reportedly threw off his imperial regalia and charged into the Ottoman soldiers on foot. His body was never identified. On May 29th, 1453, after 1123 years, the Roman Empire, the last continuous thread back to the age of Caesar, ended. But what Byzantium left behind could not be conquered. Byzantine scholars fleeing the fall of Constantinople carried their manuscripts west into Italy. The texts of Plato, Aristotle, Ptolemy, preserved in Constantinople for centuries, arrived in Florence and Venice just as the Renaissance was beginning. Some historians argue that without the fall of Byzantium, there is no Renaissance. Without the Renaissance, there is no scientific revolution. Without the scientific revolution, there is no modern world. Byzantine art shaped the entire Orthodox Christian world. The mosaics, the icons, the sacred architecture of Russia, Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, the Russian Tsar, the word comes from Caesar, saw himself as the heir to Byzantium, who Moscow called itself the Third Rome, and Hagia Sophia, the church that Justinian built in 537, still stands in Istanbul today. First a church, then a mosque, then a museum, then a mosque again. It had outlasted every empire that ever claimed it. Byzantium lasted 1,000 years, was forgotten for 500, and is only now slowly being remembered for what it actually was. Not a footnote to Rome, not the Middle Ages, but one of the most extraordinary civilizations in the history of the world. The next episode would be about the Crusades and how Western Europe's holy war accidentally destroyed the empire that had protected it for centuries. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and see you next time.
From